The horizon should have shimmered. Every creature of the desert knew the midday illusion, the trembling line where heat pulled itself upward, making distant dunes sway like waves, making mirages ripple, making thirsty animals doubt their own eyes. The gazelle had grown up watching that wavering band every day, a sign that the sun was doing its work, that heat rose, that winds carried salt from the flats and moisture from the deeper basins. The trembling horizon meant the world was behaving as it always had. But today, as the gazelle stood on thin, trembling legs near the pale expanse of the salt flats, the horizon was still, dead still. She lowered her head cautiously, tasting the air with slow, deliberate breaths. Her flanks rose and fell in the rhythm of a creature both alert and exhausted. The wind carried its usual bite, sharp with salt, thin with dryness, yet the heat above the flats remained flat and unmoving. No distortion, no shimmer, as if the desert had forgotten the sun. The gazelle took a few hesitant steps across brittle ground. Her hooves clicked against salt crust that should have been softening under the day's heat, but the surface felt dry and rigid, cracked like old pottery. She paused beside a low rise where sparse tufts of golden grass clung stubbornly to life. Even these blades looked wrong, stiff, dehydrated, their tips curling inward as if the night's coolness had never left them. The gazelle lifted her head. The world looked frozen, not in temperature, but in movement. No rising waves of hot air, no distortions swallowing the far-off dunes, no floating pockets of mirage. The desert horizon lay sharp and solid, a knife edge between pale earth and endless sky. For the first time in her life, she could see distant shapes with perfect clarity. Too much clarity. She saw rocks that should have been blurred by heat haze. She saw a lone acacia tree on a far dune that should have rippled like a watercolour by this hour. She saw vultures circling, each wingbeat crisp and unmagnified. It made her uneasy. The desert was not supposed to be so clear. She turned her head, ears flicking toward a faint clatter. Humans. A small research team in dust-covered trucks stood near a set of metal poles anchored into the salt bed. They shielded their eyes, staring at instruments blinking with confused readings. The gazelle lowered her body, sinking slightly on her slender legs, watching. One scientist gestured toward a thermometer mounted on a tripod. Ground temperature rising normally, he said, but no convection layer forming. Another wiped sweat from her forehead, though the heat wasn't oppressive yet. Without convection, no heat haze. The horizon should be trembling by now. A third crouched beside a device that pumped air samples into a small, clear vial. The air is too stable, no vertical mixing, salt wind is blowing, but it's not carrying anything upward. The gazelle didn't understand the words, but she felt their tension. A desert without rising heat was a desert without breath. A desert without breath was a danger no creature was built to face. She stepped away from the humans, moving toward an old wadi that once held water after storms. She remembered soft mud beneath her hooves there. Now the wadi floor was chalky white and smooth. No cracks from heating, no shimmer from the air above it. She approached carefully, sniffing at the surface. It tasted of salt and ancient dryness. A lizard darted past, except it didn't dart. It moved slowly, sluggishly, its body cool when it should have been warming itself. It paused beside a rock, waiting for heat that wasn't rising. The gazelle watched it attempt to bask, lifting its head toward the sun, but nothing changed. The reptile blinked, confused, then crawled under the rock again. A desert lizard seeking shade at noon. Wrong. Everything was wrong. The gazelle continued onward, hooves tapping lightly against the hard crust. She approached a cluster of thorn bushes where insects usually hummed in midday heat. But today, the bushes were silent. A single beetle climbed the stem of one bush, its body moving stiffly. It reached the top, paused, then simply stopped, unable to decide its next move. Heat activated insects. No heat meant stillness. The gazelle's skin twitched. A breeze lifted across her back, carrying salt with it. Normally, hot wind caused her muscles to tense, to brace against dehydration. But the wind today felt cool. Too cool. Her ears twisted. A faint bleat echoed distantly. Another gazelle stood alone near a ridge, her sides heaving as she tried to catch scents the still air refused to carry. The gazelle approached her cautiously. The other female flicked her tail nervously, but didn't run. Together they stared at the unmoving horizon, their instincts screaming at them to flee, though neither knew from what. A hawk swooped overhead, but its flight was different. Too straight, too precise. Normally hot air rising off the flats gave raptors lift. Today the bird flapped hard, unable to catch thermal updrafts that simply weren't forming. The gazelle watched it struggle, wings beating harder than nature intended. She looked back toward the humans. One of them now scanned the horizon with binoculars, frustration etched deep into his expression. "Visibility is perfect," he muttered. "Too perfect. I can count shrubs 8 kilometers away." Another tapped readings from a heat sensor. Temperature differential is there, so why no distortion? The woman kneeling by the salt crust lifted a small sample plate. The surface is hot. The air is hot, but nothing rises. Something is suppressing the vertical lift. Suppressing the lift, holding the heat down, locking the desert in place. The gazelle took a few slow steps backward. Her hooves scraped lightly against the crust. The sound carried cleanly, unnervingly far. Normally the trembling air would blur and dull such noise. She lifted her head again. The horizon remained sharp, unmoving, cold in its stillness. The sun climbed higher, baking the land, yet no shimmer formed. The salt wind blew sideways but not upward, brushing against her legs in a strange low flow, as if the desert were exhaling only along the surface, unable to release anything into the sky. Her chest tightened with something primal, fear of a predator that could not be seen, of a threat that did not move. She twitched her tail, restless. A herd of oryx appeared far across the flats. The gazelle could see them with impossible clarity, each flick of an ear, each twitch of skin. They stood motionless, staring in all directions, unsettled by the same wrongness. Nothing hid in the desert today. There were no mirages to distort distance, no heat waves to mask shapes, only clarity, sharp, unnatural clarity. The gazelle stepped back again. Her instincts told her to run, but where? Every direction looked the same, still, sharp, too visible, too quiet. She lowered her head, breathing shallowly. The salt wind brushed past her again, cold against the inside of her ears. The horizon remained a solid line, refusing to tremble. The desert was holding its breath, and every creature on the flats felt it. By late afternoon, the desert should have been trembling with heat, vibrant, wavering, alive. Every dune should have danced behind a veil of distortion, every rock softened by shimmering mirages. But as the sun climbed to its highest arc, the gazelle saw nothing change. The horizon remained sharp as a blade, the dunes solid and motionless, as if carved from metal rather than sand. She stepped lightly across the salt crust, but her hooves felt no upward rush of heat. Normally, hot air rose so fast it stung her nostrils, carrying scents far and wide, the musk of predators, the sweet trace of vegetation, the dry powder of other herds. Today the air around her legs felt warm, but the air at her shoulders felt the same. No gradient, no lift. She stopped near a patch of cracked earth where an old wadi used to gather runoff. The ground flickered faintly with sunlight, but even those gleams were steady. No shimmer, no blur. As she bent her head to sniff the surface, she noticed something unsettling. The ground was heating unevenly. The salt crust seared under the sun, but the air above it stayed strangely cool. Heat trapped at ground level. Her ears twitched. The lizard from earlier crawled out again, moving even slower, its body refusing to warm. It paused atop a pale stone, expecting the familiar pulse of sunlight soaking into its skin. But it only blinked, confused, then slumped flat against the rock. Its tail trembled once before going still. Desert reptiles lived by heat gradients. Without them, they were lost. The gazelle turned sharply as another sound reached her, a low, resonant groan, not from the earth, but from the sky, thunder at a distance. She lifted her head high. Thunder without clouds. A dry metallic rumble rolled across the flats, but the sky remained stark blue, washed white near the sun. No storm, no humidity, no signs of atmospheric unrest, yet the air trembled with sound. The gazelle stepped backward instinctively. The sound made her heart race, made her legs flex to flee. But flee where? Nothing moved enough to give direction. The desert felt like a painting suddenly vibrating in its frame. Far off, the oryx herd shuffled uneasily. They bunched together, pressing horns to flanks, restless but unsure. Normally they spread out widely in heat haze, losing each other visually in shimmering air. But now, in this unnatural clarity, they looked too close, too exposed, every detail painfully sharp. Another rumble, another tremor in the air. Still no clouds. The gazelle pressed her ears flat, trying to distinguish direction. She could not. Sound travelled too cleanly across the still air, bouncing from dune to dune in perfect lines. Dry thunder echoed without echo, as if the world swallowed and returned it flat. She turned toward the researchers again. The humans were now gathered around a larger weather tower, wires trailing like dried vines across the salt crust. One tapped frantically at a tablet. Temperature inversion getting stronger? Another cursed under his breath. The ground is boiling and the air isn't rising. This is atmospheric lockup. A third, voice shaking slightly, spoke into a recorder. Zero vertical convection. Heat is accumulating at the surface but not transferring upward. Horizon stable. No wavering at 42 degrees Celsius. In all my years, I've never seen a desert without mirage activity. They were frightened. The gazelle sensed that easily. Humans feared what broke patterns, just like animals did. She moved away from them, stepping deeper onto the salt flat. Each step echoed strangely, carrying far into the open. Her own hoofbeats startled her, too sharp, too loud, without the softening haze that usually softened sound. A shadow crossed overhead. A hawk again. But this time, the hawk struggled even more. Its wings beat in rapid, uneven bursts. It attempted to spiral upward, but there were no thermals. No rising columns of heat to lift it. It flapped harder, zigzagging, then dropped abruptly, catching itself with frantic effort before veering toward the ground. It landed heavily on a rock and sat panting, wings half spread. A bird of prey grounded by still air. The gazelle understood the danger implicitly. If raptors couldn't fly, predators would roam on foot more frequently. And heat that stayed low meant scent stayed low too, pooling close to the ground instead of dispersing upward. Predators would smell prey at unnatural distances. She would smell them too late. Her legs tensed. She scanned the horizon, perfectly sharp, unwavering. Too easy to see movement, too easy for others to see her. She lowered her head, trying to appear small, though nothing in the desert moved enough to distract any watching eyes. A distant silhouette appeared. The gazelle froze. A jackal, a hyena, a lone cheetah. But as it moved, she recognized it as another gazelle, a young male, limbs thin, breath shallow. He stopped often, sniffing at the air for guidance that wouldn't come. When he saw her, he flicked his ears but did not approach. He simply stood, looking around in confusion. Without heat moving upward, scents travelled unpredictable paths. Herds could not find one another. No shared safety, no collective senses. She watched the young male breathe rapidly, his flanks ruffling under the low wind. The salt wind blew again. Flat, horizontal, unchanging. It only moved across the ground, as if pressed downward by invisible weight. It carried no heat upward, no safety signals, no mirage haze. The gazelle felt a growing pressure in her chest. Not heat, not exhaustion. Instinct, telling her that something fundamental was failing. A sharp crack echoed across the flat. She jolted, legs stiffening. It was not a predator, it was human equipment. The researchers had dropped a metal probe onto the crust. One knelt beside it, running gloved fingers across a readout. "We've got a boundary layer cap forming," he said breathlessly. "A thermal lid." The woman beside him squinted toward the horizon. "That's why nothing is rising. The heat is trapped under a cooler, denser air mass. A lid on the entire desert." The third scientist's face paled. "That means convection will collapse. No thermals. No mirages. No vertical mixing. The desert will cook from the ground up." The gazelle didn't know their words, but she understood the meaning in their voices. The desert was choking. Her nostrils flared rapidly. She took a step back, then another. Her eyes darted across the impossibly sharp landscape. No shimmer meant no cover, no safety, no distortion to hide predators, or prey, or her. Everything was too bright, too visible, too exposed. Suddenly, movement rippled through the oryx herd. They broke into a slow, uneasy trot, not a stampede, but aimless wandering, milling in circles, lifting dust that hung low instead of drifting upward. The young gazelle bucked once nervously, then followed them at a distance. Not joining, not separating, simply drifting, the way an animal without orientation moved. The older gazelle, the one near the salt wind's edge, watched them go. Her instinct screamed to join them, to run, to seek cover. But cover meant nothing now. Without thermal distortion, even a distant predator could track her clearly against the white flats. She took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. The horizon remained unnatural and still. The desert did not breathe. Heat did not rise. Air did not lift. The world felt held down by an invisible weight, a weight so heavy even mirages could not escape it. The gazelle lowered her head slowly, her breath shallow. If the heat did not rise soon, if the horizon remained frozen, if the desert's breath stayed trapped beneath the sky, there would be no hiding, no cooling, no escape, only clarity. Harsh, perfect clarity, the kind no living creature in the desert was meant to survive.